I'm Peter Iredale. I'm the Director of Business Development at ALLINNO. I co-founded the company a bit over 4 years ago. Prior to that, my most kind of recent commercial or corporate life was at Oracle, where I spent several years selling the Primavera product suite, including OPRA, or Oracle Primavera Risk Analysis. Santosh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I've been fairly well known amongst the Safran community for a long time. I'm here, one of their longest users, but my name is Santosh. I come from a planning and scheduling background, mainly in the infrastructure and construction space here in Australia and around our region. I've been doing that for about 2 decades, half of which time I've been very heavily involved in doing a lot of schedule risk analyses, which is what drew me to Safran Risk in the first place. And I now work alongside Peter and the team at ALLINNO at spreading the good word about Safran Risk to all our users and potential users in our part of the world.
Okay, thank you. Next slide.
Okay, just let me click. There we go.
Okay, so this is how we intend to spend the next 30 minutes with you. So some quick further introductions to introduce this scenario of Beyond the P Dates, which looks at disruptors beyond what you would normally have done in your schedule risk analyses, and then we'll have it wrapped up in 30 minutes. Next slide. Thank you. So the focus today is on Safran Risk. ALLINNO took the distribution rights for Australia and New Zealand for Safran Risk about 2.5 years ago, and since that time, the customer base here has swelled significantly. In fact, looking at this slide, so the right-hand side shows the Safran Risk clients, not all of them, but left-hand side is some of our traditional clients as ALLINNO. It's getting at the stage I'm going to have to rejig this slide to make room for a few more logos, which are actually coming, Mark. Have some good news for you soon. So the inspiration for this presentation is that many of our customers, while they took on Safran Risk largely to replace OPRA, started questioning and challenging us about things that they could do well beyond what OPRA could do. And this modelling of production rates is one such example. So I'd like to just say thanks to our customers for keeping us on our toes and throwing us a few challenges. I'd also like to acknowledge Santosh, because he seems to thrive on this stuff and he always finds a way through. So thanks so much, Santosh. So what we're going to do today, I think if we go to the next slide, thank you.
Sorry, I think there's a bit of a delay in the screens updating.
Okay, so the example we're going to use is it's a rail tunnel with a tunnel boring machine. And I'd never kind of really sort of understood the mechanism of a tunnel boring machine. It's very interesting, and I'll introduce you to it briefly. What happens up above ground is they have these things called precast liners or segments. And as you can see from the picture, it's where these segments, which are sections of the ring of the tunnel, they get precast and they then get put on trolleys and they follow the tunnel boring machine as it progresses. Next slide. Okay, and here's our tunnel boring machine. So on this diagram from the left, those precast segments come in on what they call the locomotive cars, and they roll up through the innards of the tunnel boring machine, making their way all the way up to the right, where you can see a group of them are kind of stacked just behind the head of the machine that says TBM. And not so clear in this picture, but there's a mechanical arm, so that once the tunnel boring machine has progressed a bit, this arm will come and grab a segment and put it in place. And eventually they create the supporting ring that stops the tunnel from collapsing. So what's critical with the tunnel boring machine is to make sure that the supply of the precast concrete segments keeps pace with the tunnel boring machine. You'll see on the head of this tunnel boring machine, it says Melbourne Metro Rail. So this isn't a fictitious example. This is an actual project which is running in my home state of Melbourne, Australia, and kind of very excited and proud of the fact that it's called Rail Projects Victoria. Rail Projects Victoria is the government entity that manages this project. They use Safran Risk for their purposes, and the joint venture contractor who is delivering the project also uses Safran Risk. So we have both owner and contractor all singing off the same page. Next slide, thank you. All right, so as Santosh sets up the demonstration, so feel free to swap over to Safran Risk. We're just going to role play a little bit. So my role in this is I'm the project director. Santosh is my lead scheduler. I've just been talking to one of my international colleagues who have gotten themselves into a whole lot of trouble where the precast segments didn't keep pace with the tunnel boring machine, and when that happens, the tunnel boring machine stops. Now, the tunnel boring machine is a very expensive piece of equipment. It's always on the critical path for these sorts of projects. You do not want it to stop. So, Santosh, I know on our project, we've allowed about a 4-month lead time to get the precast area into production. I just want to know, first of all, I'd like to kind of see how that looks in terms of the supply of the precast versus the demand the tunnel boring machine is going to put on that. And then I'd like to add some risks and execute some risks around production and see what that is likely to do, how that could disrupt my project.
Sure, thanks, Pete. So, fun fact before I continue, you mentioned those tunneling segments. What many people may not be aware of is that each and every single one of those segments is actually uniquely designed. So it's not just a matter of understanding how many, but each one fits in together like specific pieces throughout the tunnel. So it's an amazing piece of design work getting all that prepared, which leads us nicely into where we are here. So in a typical, I mean, what we really wanted to emphasize as part of this demonstration project is the power of Safran Risk is well beyond just doing a risk analysis. You know, it's a fantastic risk tool. It does the scheduling side of risk analysis better than any other tool, in my opinion. And because it's a scheduling tool, it also allows us to do a lot of the traditional scheduling type of analyses as well. So for the purposes of this example, where we're talking about producing segments for a tunnel, what we've done is in our schedule here, we've actually loaded the schedule up with the resources that reflect both the supply of those segments, which, as you've mentioned earlier, gets produced in what's called a manufacturing facility or a precast facility. So we've placed resources that define the quantity of these segments being produced. And that then produces this red curve that we can see on our resource profile here. But we've also put a consumption or a demand curve, which is the rate at which the tunnel boring machine is going to be using up those tunneling segments. And that's in the various tunneling activities that are further down in the schedule, but ultimately it produces this green curve here. So the takeaways from just being able to run that level of analyses at the beginning is, first of all, as you quite rightly noted, there's about a 4-month gap before the time we start producing to when they start being consumed. So there's a slight buffer there. But you can also see that the area between these two curves actually represents a storage capacity, or in other words, what buffer we have built into our schedule. That means that even if there's some delays, we'll always have this additional capacity to move segments around or to size up the facility that we may need to keep a handle of all these segments.
Hey Santosh, I also noticed, which I'm pleased to see, is that you've got a gradual ramp up of production as well, which is
correct. Yes. Yeah. Obviously, with these type of exercises, there's always what we call a learning curve. So your initial production rates or your initial the speed at which you do the work may be a bit slower than you might anticipate once you're into the full operational side of that. So that's also reflected in the way that we create both the schedule activities and the way we load the resources on. Okay, so now we're not just talking resource analyses in this demonstration, Pete. One of the questions that you want to understand is how comfortable are we in this position? So obviously what we can do as part of a schedule risk analysis is we can load various risks onto our schedule and map how these may ultimately affect the project. So we have a number of risks assigned to our schedule here, various aspects of a tunneling project, from commissioning, design, stations, tunnels, and obviously that precast tunneling segment as well. So obviously one of the beauties of Safran Risk is that you can actually analyze your schedule or your schedule risks in many different scenarios and outcomes. So what we can do is we can run the model with all the risks turned on, or we can even run the model with a selection of risks. So what I'm going to do to answer your first question, Pete, is I'm going to run this analysis with just the precast production facility, or that supply side of the equation, with just those risks turned on. So we press the button, and obviously we all should know how fast Safran is in producing these results. I can select my focus activities and have a look at how that looks. So what we're seeing here is, okay, just on the precast supply alone, there's a little bit of delay overall, but let's have a look at that back in our schedule tab, where if I just flick update the histogram, you'll now see, Pete, what we're actually able to do is take the risk information, or the risk adjusted information, and actually present that in the resource histogram. So what we're seeing here with this dashed red line, Pete, is that if we were to add risks to our production, or that supply side of the equation, here's the resulting profile. I think you can see what the problem is.
Yeah. So we're going to fall behind in terms of supply. Well, quite a length of the tunnel, which is bad, which means the tunnel boring machine will stop.
Correct.
So
Yes. In this,
yeah, that 4 months is looking a little bit shaky. But can we just look a little bit closer at the risks that are creating delay?
So we had a number of risks. You know, there's a good dozen or so risks in our model that we've prepared here, but we've run this analysis, Pete, on just the production supply.
Right. Okay. And can we have a look how those risks are set up?
Okay.
Because I noticed before, excuse me, I saw the 140% number as so this is the variability in effect of production, isn't it?
Correct. So what we've modeled here is that the actual supply of the production may be different to what we anticipated. In this case, we're suggesting that it may take longer to produce all these segments. We've also got an additional risk in here that just says actually getting the facility set up and running may just take longer. Now, the thing is, Pete, that what we've done here is we've looked at only the precast production facility risks in isolation. What we really need to do is we need to understand that, yes, there may be delays, that there's potential risks on that precast facility, but there's also a whole bunch of other risks that may affect the demand side of the equation as well. So what we're going to do now is let's run this model with all of the risks turned on. So this is the whole risk model as such. So again, we'll run it. There's no noticeable difference in the speed again. So now the result obviously looks very different because we're working with a different set of risks. But when we return back to the schedule view and view our two curves again, I've now got a dashed line that represents the demand side of things, which is the green dashed line. So to me, again, that's still not looking very good.
Yeah, look, it's paramount that the tunnel boring machine doesn't stop. So we need that green dash line to always be above. I'm sorry,
Correct.
always be below the red dash line. I looked at back on the variability, or the production variability risk. That 140% number keeps catching my eye.
Yep.
So I want to try something, because you know, we've done these quite a few times now, and we're familiar with this. We've got the slow ramp up of the production, comfortable with that. But that 140%, I don't think we've ever kind of seen that sort of variability. Can we just tweak that back a bit, please? Say 120?
Sure. So what we have here is what we'd call a very pessimistic approach to life. We're saying we're never going to improve, and it could take potentially 40% longer to do everything we need. Now, I hear your comments, and what we may see is that actually maybe we're being a little bit conservative in the risk analysis that we're doing here. So why don't we, and again, this is demonstrating one of the key benefits of using a tool like Safran Risk is I don't need to go back and change everything in my model, changing durations, changing minimum and maximum values. All I need to do is change the risk values here. So what I'm going to do is, why don't we model this as 90, 100, 120%? Does that make you a little bit more comfortable, Pete?
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
more realistic, yeah, given our experience.
Probably, agreed. Well, I mean, for those who may be keeping a tab on Australia, just about all our capital cities have recently built metros, so producing these segments shouldn't be as risky as it perhaps was. So let's just run that analysis again. And, you know, again, this is really highlighting the benefits of actually having that full scheduling capabilities within your risk analysis tool, is that you're not just doing a risk analysis to look at what is my P50 or my P80 date. You can actually take the power of having that full scheduling engine and all the scheduling capabilities to run a series of other reports as well. So now, Pete, we're looking at these two curves, a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, yeah. So I've now got the red dotted line above the green dotted line. That means supply is always available to the tunnel boring machine.
Correct. Yes. Certainly the buffer has been eaten up a lot, but based on this modelling, we shouldn't see any issues with the supply versus the demand side of things.
Yeah. Okay. So what? Look, that's been very helpful, and I want to go and share that with the other stakeholders. Let them know about the change to the production variability. I don't think anyone's going to challenge that, but I still want to tell them and just put everybody at ease that we think that this is not going to be a disruptor on the project.
That's right.
So
And
could you
so,
just export that as a report? Thanks.
yep. So certainly one of the options you can do is, you know, Safran has the ability to have these histograms as separate windows. So we can obviously take that. We can either grab a screen grab of that, or we can produce a print preview of it. This may jump across to one of my other monitors when it runs, which it has. So I'll just drag that across here. So you can see here, this is another standard Safran Risk output, which can be printed to PDF or copied to the clipboard and pasted into your documents. All of this reporting is available. And I might just add, Pete, I mean, this is just one example where we're taking, you know, beyond the P dates, which is the title of our presentation, to demonstrate, you know, there's a lot of information that's actually captured when you run the risk analysis. And, you know, it's more than just simply about what is the P date for the finish of my project, for example. The risk information, the risk adjusted information has a lot of potential to be used for further analyses and understanding what are those risks to our projects.
Very good.
So let me just flick back to our slides, Pete.
Yep, thank you.
So there is an example of how we might output that report. So what I've done here is taken that graphic image out of Safran, just added some labels to it in a, you know, in a simple tool like PowerPoint, which clearly conveys the message that we were sending about what are the risks to our production and our supply.
Oh, gee, that makes it so much simpler, A, for me to understand, but also B, for me to convey to other stakeholders. So in this case, things have worked out pretty well. So the allowance and the ramping of production will be fine. But you know, in other situations where we have an issue that we might need to address, some presentation like this makes it very simple to convey to get the collective heads to resolve the issue.
Yep, absolutely. So let me just continue to the next slide.
Yep, thank you. All right, so look, that wraps up the demonstration, and we'll be open to receive your questions. Just kind of wanted to remind people, I know, Mark, you've put a handout up in the handouts area. So good reminder for people to grab that just before the conference ends.
Sure. If I can just expand upon that. So, but thank you for what you shared, Peter. I'm going to give the audience some question time in a minute, and there's already 2 good questions come up. But I know when you had a longer period of time, you've actually been able to share 2 quite different examples. This one and a very different one. You know, what else can you do after you've done all this hard work? You know, the data's there, as you said, Santosh. It's just a case of, you know, unearthing it and answering different business questions that our senior stakeholders might really care about. So there's another example of that, and Peter and Santosh, this is to the audience now, have been kind enough to sort of encapsulate that in a longer video. So again, very convenient way for you guys to communicate what you might be been inspired about today with your other stakeholders, and try and get, you know, stir up some interest and really push the boundaries and advance the effectiveness of you and your team and the whole project controls community. So we've put it in a blog. The blog is about to be published any day now. It's got a write-up and the video. In order to get it, we need you to sign up to the blog series, and you get that and the other blog series I mentioned a few moments ago. So there's a link to sign up in the handout right now. Tiny little caveat, would you believe it? We just had a little technical glitch with our website in the last 2-3 hours. The website's fine. Everything to do with blog content, we just got a glitch. So do hold on to the handouts. If you click on a link and it's not working, it's not you. It's just a little technical glitch. You know, put it in your back pocket for 24 hours and try it again tomorrow. But Peter and Santosh's blog with a video embedded is well worth watching. I do encourage you. Right, a couple of questions to ask. Someone's been very astute here. Santosh, on your actual Safran Risk presentation, on the tabs where you've got schedule warnings, it came up with a number like 216, I believe. And
it may well have.
Someone's querying that. I guess the thought is that high? Should that be? Is that a concerning number? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's. I mean, first of all, this is not a real project. So this was a mock-up that we created for the purposes of doing this demonstration. Okay. So I may well have been a bit liberal in my in my warnings, but what you'll more than likely find is that a lot of these warnings, as I often find when I'm running these schedule analyses, are exactly that. They're just a warning. It's a caution. It's not a showstopper. You know, it's not something that will necessarily affect the quality of the output. You know, for instance, here we're just getting a warning saying that there's a lag value that's higher than a certain number. You know, there may well be a very good reason for that, and you can see the bulk of those warnings are actually in that case. So, as part of that schedule risk analysis process, obviously understanding the schedule is one of those steps, and part of that is also checking how suitable the schedule is for the risk analyses. You know, has it been built correctly? Is it going to model the impacts that we want to model correctly? So the schedule warnings, absolutely keep an eye on it, but to some extent, some of these are indeed just warnings and not necessarily things that will affect the outcomes.
Okay, good. Thank you, Santosh. I have another question. Since you're talking about tunneling, you know, which is a linear project, questions come up. There's obviously software like turbocharts, which is very good for kind of tracking projects in a linear sense. Question is about, is there any integration between Safran Risk and linear
certainly there is. I mean, not to take up too much time on that topic, but so turbocharts has actually got the ability to synchronize and read directly from a Safran Risk project, so that literally as you press the analyze button and you pull up those risk adjusted dates, they can be fed into the linear charts or the linear schedule chart, and you can then do a what you might call a risk adjusted linear schedule, which is showing you the same chart, but rather than using your original deterministic and planned dates from the schedule, it can show you your selected P50, P80, whichever one of your focus percentiles that you're generating, they can also be presented in that sort of tool as soon as you run the analysis. So it's a real time, I mean, it's very powerful, the combination of being able to make changes to your risk analysis by selecting risks, changing values in Safran, getting the result in a timely manner, and then seeing that change almost instantly is a very powerful combination of tools.
Okay, thank you. Well, I thought this was a very convenient presentation to finish on. You guys might have missed it, but it really beautifully ties together a couple of other themes that two of our other presenters made. We kicked off, well, first of all, we kicked off the whole series with me saying, you know, we as a community have got an opportunity to advance the effectiveness of our project controls work. And then JD kicked things off and said, yeah, and if you want to get your boss's attention, you better think very smartly about how he or she likes to receive data. And he talked about, you know, some people are very visual, some people are very data or word orientated. You need to get the balance. And I think what you guys have shown is just beautifully, you know, how effectively you can take something which is quite technically complex and simplify it into just, you know, a red dotted line and a green dotted line, and you know, who can't get the point that you're making there. And the last thing I liked about it was, you know, the confidence I think, you know, you in particular, Santosh, have in terms of like when Peter said, you know, when I've got a question for one of my clients, I just ask you, Santosh, and you have a knack of coming, you know, with some know-how and a powerful tool, right? The answer's always there.
Correct.
And I think that speaks to Donna's point. You know, she was saying, you know, encouraging the risk community to step away from just churning out the same old reports time and time again, which is our comfort zone, but really leaning in and listening and talking to the stakeholders that we're serving and asking them, what business problems are you really facing, right? And then, you know, and knowing, depending on what they ask for, chances are, you know, some know-how and a complicated, you know, a sophisticated tool, we can give them those answers and really up the game, you know, of what it is that we do. So I think, you know, I think you've beautifully tied together what we're saying, you know, to the audience today, which is, you know, we can do more. You know, we really can do more, and get the professional credibility that we really deserve. So thank you so much, Santosh. Thank you, Peter. I know you've got up at an ungodly hour, and you know, I can't thank you enough for that.